What's up, everyone? Welcome into the studio and into the Denver Sports Podcast. I'm Christian Saez, and today we're talking all things Super Bowl, Super Week here. It's the Broncos and all of our buddies with the Broncos out in New Orleans having a good time. We're going to have Hank calling in the show here soon. We've got a good show lined up for today here on the Denver Sports Podcast. That's Henry Chisholm hanging out with you. Hank, welcome to the show, man. We're live in the Toyota Lounge. You're live from the New Orleans Lounge, wherever you are. How's it going?
I am doing just fine. So we finished the show like 15 minutes ago and sprinted to the Airbnb. Meanwhile, I'm having this tooth issue, so I had to talk to an orthodontist on the phone and like schedule an appointment. And she thought I was insane because I was like huffing and puffing, and there's like a train going by. Found my AirPods, clicked on right at 1:15. And now we're
Nice.
here.
Now we're here. I'm glad you joined us and pivoted a little bit. I know we were trying to get this all figured out last second. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on with us. And we got a good show because there's a lot going on out in New Orleans, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But before we do have some breaking news on our end of things here in Denver. I don't know if you've seen this with all of the chaos that's happening in New Orleans, but the Altitude TV just announced that they have come to an agreement with Comcast to carry Nuggets and Avs games on Comcast channels. Now, again, I know, like I said, we're taking a sidestep for a moment away from the Super Bowl stuff, but this is huge news for sports fans in general here in Denver. That means if you have Comcast, you're going to get Avs games, Nuggets games. And I know there's still a lot of frustration over missing the last, few years. Really, what's it been, 6 years that this conflict has been happening? But this is a great step here for the Denver sports community. And since this is the Denver Sports Podcast, I figured I'd start things off by at least putting some thoughts out there on that. This is big news here in Denver.
That is big news, and I had not heard. Um, yeah, it's obviously a game changer, and it really sucks that so many people weren't able to watch the Avs and Nuggets in the seasons that they won championships because those are the kinds of things that just don't happen very often. And people find their ways, and if you're pirating games, you're going to the bar more often to see games or whatever it may be. I mean, if you wanted it, it was there, but if the casual fan, somebody who would normally watch, hey, I watch 25 Nuggets games a year. Instead, you're watching 10 at most. You're
Yeah.
watching national broadcast wherever you go. So it's really the end of an era, and it doesn't make up for the fact that not only would Nuggets fans, casual Avs fans be able to have enjoyed those championship seasons more, you also probably just have so many more fans if those hadn't happened, if this whole ordeal had never happened. So, um, I don't know. It's definitely like an exciting thing to happen, but it is also more so kind of a reminder of just how terrible this past 5 years has been.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's no excusing missing the last few years for a lot of, like you said, the casual fans. But the beauty is both the teams are still in a championship window, definitely in a playoff window. You still have prime Nikola Jokic playing on the Nuggets. You still have McKinnon, McCarr, all the greatness that is the Colorado Avalanche. So it's a big deal. It's such a big deal that Adam Schefter actually tweeted about it. I'm sure he's in New Orleans doing all football stuff or in
Yep.
his studios or wherever. So let's segue back into football because that's really why we're here. We're here to talk football. And now I know you guys have been jumping around a lot. You've been talking to a lot of people. We're going to get into more of, kind of some of the experiences you've had and some behind the scenes on that as the show goes on. But I want to start this show, since this is the Denver Sports Podcast, by talking a little bit about the Broncos and taking a trip down memory lane looking back on the Broncos Super Bowls, and I was doing some research because I'll admit, out of full transparency, I didn't grow up in Denver, right? I moved here 2016, 2015, and have lived here since then. But I didn't grow up living in the Denver area like a lot of people who watch these shows do. So I had to educate myself on some of the past Broncos Super Bowl experiences. And I got to say, I was actually surprised at how many Super Bowls the Broncos had gone to before I was even born. And so I got to ask, because, I mean, as you know, the Broncos have been to 8 Super Bowls in their franchise history. Do you feel like, because of a lot of the drought that the Broncos were in with the quarterback situation over the last, since 2016, basically, that a lot of people outside of Denver don't realize how prominent the Broncos are in the history of football and the Super Bowls that they've been to over the decades of Broncos history?
There's definitely some of that, and I think a lot of it is generational. Um, this is a side note, but so last night, one of the things we did, we were walking around talking to all the Chiefs players we could find, all the Eagles players we could find, and one of the questions was, Saquon needs 29 yards to have the most rushing yards ever, regular season and postseason combined. Can you name the player who currently holds that record? The answer, of course, is Terrell Davis. He has the
Sure.
most combined regular season postseason yards ever. Not only did not one of the probably 8 people we asked get the answer right, we told them he was a Bronco and he won back-to-back Super Bowls. Still not one of them got it right. So that's, I mean, you just have to remember that the guys we're talking to, a lot of them born like in the 2000s, like weren't even
Yeah.
alive. And so their memories of the Broncos are, for those guys who are currently in the NFL, the Peyton Manning years, like you have those, and then kind of the drought since. For people a bit younger than that, they probably don't even remember Peyton Manning as a Bronco all that well. Um, and so I think a lot of it's generational. I think that the Broncos, because because of Pat Bowlen, there was kind of like this through line through it all. Um, you could kind of just see the Broncos as this one entity. But after Pat Bowlen moved on, and you kind of had this ownership question, and now all of a sudden it's Walmart that owns the team. Like I
Yeah.
think that just there was this one big chunk era from the early 80s all the way through, or even, I mean, 77 you can go back to. You think 83 when Elway gets there, but the Orange Crush gone to a Super Bowl in 1977, had never been to the playoffs before that season. Um, you can kind of see that all the way through, like the early 2000s is one chunk. But that just doesn't feel so prominent because it's no longer Pat Bowlen in charge. In the same way, like if Jerry Jones were to stop running the Cowboys, all of a sudden you just feel a little bit more disconnected from all the great things that he did as owner, and some of the other stuff that he's done recently, which is
Yeah.
not nearly as good. I
Hey,
think
hey,
there's just a lot that goes into that stuff.
I will say Jerry Jones is, as of now, the least hated GM
Yeah.
in Dallas at the moment. We're not going to get too deep into that. But hey, I got some Broncos Super Bowl trivia for you. I wanted to toss out. They're nothing too crazy, but
Okay.
see if you can test your knowledge on the Broncos and the NFL Super Bowl experience. The Broncos, as I had already said, have made 8 Super Bowl appearances. Who is the only team in the NFL that has more Super Bowl appearances than the Denver Broncos?
That's a good one. And I remember that it changed recently, which makes me think, is it the 49ers?
No, although I will, my hint to you is
Steelers?
there are 3 teams along with the Broncos that are tied for second most
Okay.
Super Bowl appearances. Then there's one team, and think relatively recent.
Was it really the Patriots?
It's
Did
the
they really get that
Patriots.
many? Because they
11.
didn't go to. Did Brady get them to their first? I guess he couldn't have if it's 11.
Yeah,
I thought
no.
I thought they didn't have any before, and so I just ruled them out. But I mean, they were pretty good.
The Tom Brady definitely the Tom Brady era helped the Patriots
Hmm.
for sure. 11 Super Bowl appearances. So, as I had said, the Broncos are tied for second most playoff appearances with 8 in NFL history, along with 3 other teams. Can you name those 3 other teams? And you were along
Yep.
the right lines.
Yep. I'll throw 49ers in there. I'll throw Steelers in there. And then, I mean, the Cowboys have this drought, so I'll avoid them, which might be a big mistake. I'll throw the Chiefs. I'll go Chiefs.
You if you had stuck with your gut, you would have had it. Steelers,
Ah,
49ers, Cowboys, all tied with 8 Super Bowl appearances, second most in the NFL. The Chiefs, obviously with their 8th Super Bowl appearance coming up here, or their 9th Super Bowl appearance, I should say, coming up here
okay.
this week, that will eclipse the Broncos. They will then have the second most Super Bowl appearances in NFL history. Now, if you go down the list, I mean, the Broncos lost their first 4 Super Bowls. They finally won their first Super Bowl in 1997. So I've got 2 parts to this next trivia. We'll start with the easy one. Can you name the 3 teams that the Broncos beat in the Super Bowl?
Oh yeah, Packers, Falcons, and then the Panthers, of course.
That's it. Okay. Now the harder part of this, can you name the teams that they lost to? There are 5 of them. And we're going
Yep.
back before you and I were born.
So you'd have the Cowboys, Washington, Giants, Seahawks, and the 49ers.
You got it. 5 out of 5.
Yep.
That's the ones. Yeah,
Yep.
it's just crazy to me that there were 4 consecutive Super Bowl losses in Broncos history. Again, going back to before you and I were even born. And that's where I think a lot of the disconnect from younger Broncos fans is that, like, the history of the Denver Broncos goes back for me to, the Peyton Manning era, right? Like that in my mind, just because that's when I had moved to Denver and growing up watching the Broncos and that kind of stuff. Like, it just didn't feel like it clicked into place until the Peyton Manning era. I would imagine that's the same for you, since, all of the Super Bowls that the Broncos were in before that, you were watching highlights of. You're not actually seeing those live. But off the top of your head, do you have a Super Bowl memory for the Broncos that stands out as like the most memorable thing in Broncos Super Bowl history for you? It could even be a highlight from before you were born, but something that really stands out on your end.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there are obviously so many. I think Vaughn's sack, the strip sack,
Yeah.
um, the touch. I mean, one of the strip sacks. Uh, that's probably the best moment because that's when you realize that like things are going really, really well. Um, obviously, I don't have recollection of the ones before the past 2, but the moment I remember from that awful one, Super Bowl 48, is halftime. Because I just remember we had a bunch of people over at the house, and everybody was so excited to hear Bruno Mars. It's like I can't.
Yeah, right.
That's where this beat that like you guys are all smiling, joking around, talking about Bruno Mars, and obviously that wasn't everybody there, but that's the moment that still lives with me. Ooh, we can even go to the more recent Super Bowl. I remember Aqib Talib. I think it's the first drive. Makes a tackle at the goal line, stops a touchdown, and just grabs guy by face mask, rips him out of bounds.
Oh yeah.
And everyone's like, "You can't do that! Like in the Super Bowl, you're calling or you're doing that. Like you're getting called for a personal foul penalty in the Super Bowl." It's like, well, he saved a touchdown. And the penalty's half the distance to the goal, which is basically nothing. But I remember again some family members who aren't huge football fans saying, like, you can't be making that mistake in the future in the Super Bowl. It's like that's a great play. Those
Yeah.
aren't maybe the big memories for all Bronco fans, but for me personally, those are
I
the
like
two.
the specifics, though. I like the specifics. We got John
Yep.
in the chat, in the Toyota chat, saying I'm a lifelong Broncos fan. Winning that first Super Bowl back in 1998 was gigantic. Yeah, I don't think anything is sweeter than the first, right? Like, I mean, we're talking, first Nuggets championship was just on another level, right? When the Rockies one day win their first World Series in 2075, you and I are going to be going to be rolling over in our
Yep.
graves just on top of the world, right? There's
Yep.
something special about the first time, for anything in life, and I'll leave it at that, because it's truly just unique in that experience. And again, going back, I was 1 when that happened, so I don't have I didn't get to live through the Broncos' first true Super Bowl. But I think what made it sweeter for a lot of Broncos fans is the fact that you had to go through hell for a long time before you got to that first Super Bowl. And again, that's why I just mentioned the Rockies with, like, when the Rockies finally win a World Series, one day it's going to be like the greatest feeling ever. The Nuggets, we felt that same thing because the Nuggets went through hell for a while before they won an NBA championship. It makes it that much sweeter when you can finally get over the hump and say that we are Super Bowl champions.
Totally. Because again, when we go back to the conversation about the who the Broncos are as an organization, as a franchise, and that's when it all changed. Because before they were like, okay, let's start in the 60s. So in the 60s, nothing good happens. I think I want to say the first 10 years they existed, they finished last or second to last their division all but one time.
Yeah.
And that might just be last all but one time. You fast forward to 1977. Again, at that point, they'd never made the postseason before. The Orange Crush defense takes them on a run to the Super Bowl where they get blown out. But that was kind of the turning point. It's like, okay, this is no longer a laughing stock. This is now like a real football team that is capable of like winning football games. That next 20 years, most of it with John Elway, you're kind of in that same tier where it's like they could absolutely make a run, but they've never actually won anything. You have that Simpsons episode where I think Homer gets like, "Congrats, you just won an NFL team." It's like, "Oh, it's the Denver Broncos." Because again, still at that point, while they're
Right.
they're having good seasons and they're making some Super Bowls, but they're never really getting over the top. And then to finally get over the top when nobody expected. I mean, you're 14-point underdogs going into that game. It's nobody believed it could happen. First of all, because the Denver Broncos and they lost so many Super Bowls, and then you've got the Packers or whatever else to finally get over that hump. It changes things. Like you look at the Buffalo Bills right now. They it's not that they have like this sad history. That's not what I would call it. But the four straight Super Bowls they go to in the 90s and never win one. You look at them now and you're like, yeah, I mean, good team. Josh Allen just
They
can't
can't
beat
get over
Patrick Mahomes. It's just
they
you
can't
can't
get
do
over
it.
the Chiefs hump. Yeah. It's crazy.
And that's the difference between they're not the 49ers, they're the Bills because they just never actually did it.
Yeah, and look, after we take a break, I want to talk about parity in the NFL, and we've talked a lot about it in baseball right now. It's been a talking point in baseball around is what the Dodgers doing fair and everything like that. But if you look at the NFL, Super Bowls come in bunches for the Broncos, for the Chiefs, for the Patriots, for the Bills. Even we can go through the list, and I want to have that conversation of is the Super Bowl more of a trend than it is kind of a surprise to a lot of teams. So let's talk about that in just a moment. But before we get into that, got to give some love to our buddies over at Breck Brew. Breck Brew is premium craft beer. They're the best craft beer that we have here in Colorado for sure, but it goes beyond that. Whenever I go visit my family in Washington or California or, even just go visit some friends, I always wish that I could bring some Breck Brew with me to make the journey because it's just, it's good vibes. It's really good vibes. We've got a bucket of Breck Brew right in front of me. It's the best craft beer that we could possibly throw out there. We love Breck Brew. My personal favorite, the Avalanche Amber Ale. We've got Broncos Country Pale Ale. We've got Mile High City for the Nuggets, the Fun Slinger also for the Broncos. Good Company Hard Seltzer. If you're not much of a beer person, maybe you want to go more of the seltzer route. They've got great stuff over there at Breck Brew. Head on down out in Littleton, just kind of along that boardwalk out there in Littleton, just right down the street from where I live. I go hit that up in the summer all the time. They've got, live music. They've got the Breck Brew Farmhouse. It's just a good time. So be sure to check them out. And also, they've got a really cool Ice Deck giveaway going on right now. It's 2 VIP tickets on the glass at an Avs game, March 28th versus St. Louis. Complimentary food and drink. Head over to breckbrew.com/ice deck to enter. The link will be in the show notes as well. Also got to give a shout out to our friends over at Bet365 because we don't do ordinary. And Bet365 is truly the best when it comes to sports betting. We know you have tons of options, tons of choices. There's a lot of sports betting partners out there and people out there that, that do sports betting. But Bet365 is a household name in the sports betting world. It's why we're exclusive partners with Bet365 because they are truly the best at what they do. They make sure that you have a great experience as a customer, as a fan, and they make sports more enjoyable, in my opinion. And that's the beauty of it. And they also have some really cool discounts as well. If you use code DNVR365 when you sign up, deposit $10, choose between either a bet and get offer by placing a bet of $5 or more, getting $150 in bonus bets, or a first bet safety net offer by placing a bet of up to $1,000. And if your qualifying bet loses, you receive a matched refund in bonus bets. Whatever the moment, or whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, back here on the Denver Sports Podcast, Christian Saez, Henry Chisholm calling in from New Orleans. Although you can't tell based on the Airbnb background, he is hanging it up having a blast out there in New Orleans. First of all, I got to ask, how's the weather been out there in New Orleans? I know you guys have been inside a lot, but like, is it nice out there?
It is nice. It's been like 70 or so and
Okay.
like pretty sunny, so can't complain. I uh I made a bunch of mistakes, but one of them was that I didn't pack until like 6 a.m. the morning that we had to leave.
Of course.
Because you have to get on the train at like 7. And I was like, yeah, hour, plenty of time. But in my rush, I did not grab my pants. So I only have shorts. And there's a
Mm.
media party tonight. So I'm really hoping after this I can find somewhere to go get pants because while the weather is nice, at night it does get a little bit chilly. And I just really like to have a pair of pants.
Also, like having a pair of pants at a media party seems like probably a
Yeah.
good way to go.
Instead of my Nike shorts.
Although I'm a big shorts guy myself. I
Yeah.
have to understand, where you're coming from. I will say
Yeah.
you're not really like you're not really missing anything crazy here in Denver, but it was 70 degrees yesterday.
Mhm.
Like that was kind
Oh.
of nice. Felt like the middle of summer. There are people golfing out on the golf course. I was looking outside and people are golfing. It feels like the middle of May in Denver. Now it's a little colder today,
Mhm.
but it's been interesting. Although our hearts are with you out there in New Orleans. You guys look like you were having a blast. I'm surprised you didn't put on the bedazzled jacket for the show, man. I saw what was it, RK wearing
Yeah.
that, or was that I think it was RK, right? Who was wearing the
Definitely one of
little
the buffs.
yeah, one of those guys.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that first night, my thought was like, let's just get it out of our system. Like this is New Orleans. We gotta at some point get a little bit reckless here.
yeah,
You do it the first night, and then you're set. Because I mean, I think I swore off alcohol again, so we'll see if that lasts through the media party, but
yeah,
at
of
least
course.
for 24 hours it's been yeah. So that first night we went out there and stopped at like one of these weird little stores. They got some weird stores here, just all sorts of sequin things, some voodoo dolls. Todd didn't think those were funny, but yeah. So we got the big sequin jacket, got the sequin hat. Um, it's a it was good. It's been a fun couple days. We first night, Bourbon Street, do all that stuff. But you can tell the Super Bowl is here because as we're just walking down there, there's like all these motorcycle police who come through and they block off the intersection. You're like, okay, okay. And then there's a big bus coming. You're like, there's the Eagles or the Chiefs or something. And yesterday, we went to lunch and then we're gonna go get some of those beignets down by the mall. And once again had to stop because there's the team hotel and here come the Eagles getting on their bus and the freaking military's
Those
out here.
freaking
Like you got
Eagles,
the
yeah.
Humvees going to make sure. Yeah, it's a it's it's a fun place, but it's very you could tell the Super Bowl's here because of just all the
Oh,
chaos and the
and it's a
security and all that stuff.
it's a who's who too. I mean, the president's going to be there. The commissioner of the NFL is going to be
Oh
there.
yeah.
Obviously, like I mean, it's a huge,
Hmm.
huge event. I remember getting to cover some big tournaments, March Madness, like national championships, that kind of thing. And it's crazy when you live in a city like this that hosts a tournament of this
Hmm.
or a game of this magnitude because your city gets overrun in that specific
Hmm.
week. And I know New Orleans, Vegas, Indianapolis, like these places are set, Texas, like these places are set up to accommodate for that. But I would imagine that if you like are living in that environment, it's just absurd. Like the closest thing I could think of in
Hmm.
Denver is like the All-Star game. When we had the All-Star game a couple years ago for the Rockies and Major League Baseball. And even that's like, I mean, baseball's just not at the same level that the NFL is in the Super Bowl. Like it's on a totally different level. I don't think we can fathom how much you take over a city when the Super Bowl is being hosted in your venue. Like that's on another level.
Yep. No, it really is crazy. Because again, like you'll just be walking, it's like, oh yeah, again, like team bus, police escort, like you're standing here for 10 minutes. Otherwise, the other options are like run by that guy with a big gun, and you probably don't want to do that.
Yeah, no,
And
probably
even
not.
like the convention center. Yeah, going down the stadium last night. I don't know, like you really do realize that there are a couple thousand media here minimum, and every one of us is probably blowing like $100 a day on oysters and whatever else and
Oh
whatever. And
my
that's
God,
before you
yeah.
start thinking about the hotels and Airbnbs. Like that really is a lot of money, and that's just the media. Because then you have all the fans out there, and there's so many people. Like even when we were flying in, there's like guys in Chiefs gear, Eagles gear leaving because again, like nobody can afford to be staying. Nobody can afford to go to the Super Bowl. Very few people can afford to like spend a couple nights at a hotel in New Orleans in Super Bowl weekend. So you come out earlier in the week and do all this sort of stuff. And so you just have people kind of like filtering throughout the week and all the big money coming in, obviously, on the weekend. Like, this city is doing well. This city is
Oh,
going
I'm
to be
sure.
making a lot of money off of all of us. And that's before, I mean, the military's out here, police are out here. Just you'll turn a corner, it's 100 cops right there. That's coming from the NFL saying like, we need you guys to provide security. So there's like just straight cash coming into the police department. It's pretty ridiculous what a Super Bowl can do to a city.
It's the NFL mafia taking over New Orleans
Hmm.
right now. It is a mob out there. I'm glad you're there. Glad you guys are giving us all this coverage. We were talking before the break about the Broncos and the NFL in general and how, the Super Bowl and the NFL as a whole feels like it comes in bunches. We're seeing it with the Chiefs. The Chiefs have the potential right now to three-peat for the first time,
Yep.
in their franchise history. And actually, I saw that the NFL just announced today that they have purchased the rights from. Oh, I took a
Yep.
screenshot of it. Who was the guy?
Phil Jackson, right?
Phil Jackson. Thank you. Yes, Phil Jackson
Yep.
has the copyright for the term three-peat, and the NFL purchased the rights to that so that they could print shirts and merchandise
Mhm.
if the Chiefs were to win the Super Bowl for the third consecutive year. But it got me thinking, like, look, everyone's up in arms about baseball being unfair, and there's no salary cap, and we need to make baseball even, and bring the parity back to baseball. But I think a lot of people don't realize that like the NFL is way more of a sport that comes in bunches, in
Yep.
waves, than any other sport out there. And we could talk about dynasties here in just a moment. But like even with the Broncos won the Super Bowl back-to-back years, 1997, 98. 2013.
Should have won it the year before.
And they should have. You're right. 2013, they
Yep.
lost. They didn't get to the Super Bowl in 2014, but they went back in
Hmm.
2015. So that's every other year those years. 1986, 87, and 89. So 2 years in a row, then you skip a year, and then one more year, all losses. The Broncos were in the Super Bowl. Like that bunch of years, you talk about a playoff window, like the Broncos had multiple Super Bowl windows in their franchise history. Chiefs on the brink of a three-peat. Tom Brady and the Patriots, went to like a million Super Bowls in a row. Even Russell Wilson and the Seahawks went to back-to-back Super Bowls. Like, it is a sport where if you can be in that elite top five in the NFL, odds are you're going to stay in that top five for a couple years if you play your cards right.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and it's totally true that of all the sports, like the least parity probably is in the NFL right now. Um, but I think the reason it doesn't get the label is because you can see where it comes from. Why are the Chiefs going to be in the Super Bowl just about every year? They're the team that drafted Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
Why did the Patriots do it? They drafted Tom Brady. Why did the 49ers do it? Because they drafted Joe Montana and then they drafted Steve Young. And
John Elway, Peyton
again,
Manning. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And then you have like those guys who kind of come and go just a little bit more. Like there's kind of like the main storyline is like that was the Tom Brady era for 20 years, and Peyton will come through and challenge him a couple times, and Ben Roethlisberger will come beat him in the AFC a couple, so the challengers kind of come and go. I think why you get the reputation that I guess baseball obviously leading right now is because like why did the Dodgers get good? Well, a part of it is they did get Shohei Ohtani, but a lot of it is they just spend so much money. And I think the
Yeah.
other piece is that you have the Chiefs, they're going to be good for another decade. And they've been good for the past half decade or more. The Patriots before that, good for 15, 20 years. But when Mahomes retires or when Brady left New England, that was it. Like that, they are now gone. Those lowly Patriots who had struggled for so long, they had their moment in the sun, and then now they're gone again. Whereas the Dodgers, the Yankees, like Yankees are gonna be in it no matter what. Like if,
Yeah.
if if the Yankees miss the postseason, it's because they made a massive, massive mistake. Because with the money they spent, honestly, like the Mets, the fact that they haven't been just even a touch better is like you really should be. I think it's just different ways because there's really probably no way to say like it's just a random team who wins this year. And honestly, like baseball might be the best at that aspect of it
Yeah, it
because
is.
so much of it is like it's a large sample size game where you say like okay, 5 game series, 7 game series, here's what's going to happen. So it's all just very different. And for some reason, the way that the NFL handles it is just more palatable to sports fans, for right or
Yeah.
for wrong.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you at all on that. And I just also think that the reason that the NFL and football in general is weighted so heavily is because of the quarterback. There's so much
Mhm,
value that goes into a quarterback. It's why when I was doing TDSP last week and we were talking about most
mhm,
impactful trades in Denver Broncos history and in Colorado sports history, John Elway made the list. And, you could argue in that moment when the Baltimore Colts traded, John Elway away for a couple first round picks and, a quarterback and whatever, like that, hey, maybe they like in that moment, maybe that trade could have ended up working out for them. But
mhm,
when you look back in hindsight, trading away a franchise quarterback the Broncos getting a franchise quarterback is the most
mhm.
valuable thing you could ever get in a franchise. It's why people are so high on Bo Nix. And so that's where I think the value and the disparity sometimes comes in the NFL is if you get a guy like Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson in his prime with the Seahawks, like Peyton Manning, even Eli Manning with the Giants, like that creates the disparity between the good teams and the teams that fall just a shade below that, and that's why I think we see a lot of Super Bowls that go back to back to back, or periods where you've got five Super Bowls across a stretch of years for teams. It is a crazy
Mhm.
aspect though to think about. I do want to ask when we come back from this next break. You know, we talk about dynasties when we talk about Super Bowls and how many Super Bowls a team has won. The Broncos have gone to 8 Super Bowls. And I want to ask the question, how many Super Bowls do you think the Broncos would have needed to have won to be considered a dynasty if you already don't consider them a dynasty? So we'll ask that question when we come back. But before we get into that, gotta give some love to some upcoming events that we have on our schedule, specifically February 28th. It's not that far away. We're already in February, folks, if you haven't opened your calendar recently. February 28th, 5 o'clock p.m., top shelf event, the Avalanche Suite Takeover versus the Minnesota Wild. It is going to be electric in Ball Arena. You get to see a team that's currently fighting for another Stanley Cup. Deep in their championship window are the Avs, and you get to do it alongside Rudo, AJ. Yeah, I don't know if AJ is going to be there, but he'll be there in spirit. Big E, like just all of the Avs guys are going to be there. It's going to be a great time. Good vibes all around. Food, drinks, your ticket all included in a suite with this takeover. So be sure to check that out. Head over to thednvr.com/events. Scan the QR code on your screen for more information on that. Also, got to give some love to our buddies over at Empire Today. We are currently sitting in a studio that was built, at least the floors were built by Empire Today. You can go to any studio
Mhm.
across all of our All-City markets. And I know All-City is very well represented out there in New Orleans right now. Well, Empire Today, they did the floors at all of our studios across our markets, and they're incredible. They're the best in the business. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to partner with them, because not only do we appreciate what they do, but they do it at a level that is really hard to match. Their customer service is great, their quality, their speed. They truly just excel in everything that they do. It's why they're a household name in the flooring business. They've got cool designs too, cool features like their virtual floor designer that help you choose the floor that's going to be the best fit for you. So check them out. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners of this show can receive a $350 off discount when you use promo code DNVR. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/DNVR for details. All right, back here on the Denver Sports Podcast, Christian Saez, Henry Chisholm, hanging out with you guys, talking Broncos Super Bowls, talking Super Bowl, all the good vibes coming out of New Orleans right now. And I had asked the question before the break, how many of the 8 Super Bowl appearances would the Broncos have needed to win to be considered a dynasty if you don't already consider them a dynasty? What are your thoughts on that?
We'll start with this. I wouldn't call it a dynasty. Um, it's tough because they were so spread out, you know?
Yeah.
So what you had 6 from 90 or from 77 to 98. I almost wonder if like I even have a tough time. They really should have won. They had a great team. I was talking to Steve Atwater about this like a month ago. But the year they lost the Jaguars in the wild card round, a terrible, not terrible, they were a playoff team, a team that they should never, ever, ever have lost to. I wonder if they had gone with the three-peat there. Is a three-peat a dynasty? Or because all it almost feels like 3 and 4 years is more of a dynasty, just because you have that time span, which I think is important. But you also have to be really, really good in that time span. Um, no, I struggle. I think it's really tough to say
Yeah, I
what
think
they
if you would
needed for a dynasty.
I think if you had strung together a couple Super Bowl wins within that 1986 to 89 window, I think you could have been considered in the dynasty conversation because, like I said,
Yeah.
they're in elite company, and a lot of the teams that you can that I talked about at the beginning of the show of like the Steelers, the 49ers, the Patriots, like those are teams that you could make the argument that are considered
Hmm.
dynasties. And the
Hmm.
Broncos are right in that conversation with them. As of now, tied for the second most Super Bowl appearances in the NFL. So I think if you had strung together just a couple Super Bowl wins within that 86 to 89 window, that conversation changes, you know, a little bit more. Now, dynasties are tough. It's a gray area. It's one of those things that like there's no like real
Yeah.
equation for a dynasty. So it's more of just like how are we feeling right now? Like that's kind of where you're at. The fact that the Broncos, I think, have been in the conversation with the teams that you would consider dynasties, I think you can put them in that conversation. Now, I think you have to get them back to the Super Bowl here within the next few years if you want to keep them in that conversation. Because again, you look at teams like the Chiefs, who are going to their ninth Super Bowl this year. They're in the conversation for a dynasty. Like you have to be keeping up with those teams. So I guess that brings the follow-up question. How far away are the Broncos from their next Super Bowl appearance? I know you guys kind of asked this just now on the show. I don't remember who your guest was. Just 30 minutes ago.
Oh,
Was
who
it
did we
Mark?
ask that
Was it
to?
Mark that you asked
It
the
might have been
question?
Mike Florio.
Or
Yeah.
Mike, thank you.
I think
That
that's who we asked. Yeah.
I think it was. I think Mike Florio was the guy that you asked the question. How what and you can get kind of granular on this of like what are the pieces that are missing, like all of that kind of stuff. But in your opinion, how far out are the Broncos from a realistic Super Bowl chance?
It's a good question because they did really well against teams with losing records this year. They had two wins against teams with winning records. They beat the Bucks and then they beat the Chiefs. Um, 38-0 against the backups, so I'm not even sure how that one counts. But they really did struggle. I mean, you think of the Ravens game and you think of the Bills playoff game, and those are supposed to be like two of the top three teams in the AFC along with the Chiefs.
Sure.
And in those games, it looked like there was a gap. But on the flip side, sort of, you get to see that they were in those games for stretches. Like even that Ravens game, right up until halftime, they just made a mistake right before halftime, and things spiraled from there. And then all of a sudden, you lose by 34 or whatever it was. The Bills game, you lose by 24, but you could have been tied going into halftime if you just make the field goal. So it's tough when you look at those games to say yes, they got blown out. So is it as simple as they have a couple more steps they need to make? Or can you just look back and say, if they had made the kick before halftime, how does that second half play out when it's
Hmm.
10-10 going into the third quarter? It's tough. I think that Bo is capable. I think that he's going to keep getting better. I think the Broncos are going to keep learning more about him and what his strengths are and build the team around him in particular versus just kind of building a team from scratch. Uh, it seems like you just need at least one weapon. If you had Saquon Barkley on this team, I wouldn't be surprised if they beat the Bills, they beat the Chiefs, and then whatever happens in the AFC Championship game happens. It's just that it's so hard to find a guy like Saquon Barkley that you can't just say like, oh, they're right around the corner because you have to find that guy. Just like they had to find Terrell Davis and Shannon Sharp and Ed McCaffrey and Rod Smith. You
What about
you just
what
need a
about
couple
Miles
more
Garrett?
stars to take the load off.
What about
I mean,
Miles
he's
Garrett?
he's one of those guys. He's one of
Yeah.
those guys. It's always so tough to justify giving away first round picks for players. You see it work for teams like the Rams. You also you also see a lot of examples where it doesn't work, including some in Denver. So it, it's
I want to.
what you really like is to find those guys in the draft. So it costs one pick, you get them for cheap for 4 years,
Yeah,
and then you got to pay
of
them.
course.
Giving up multiple first round picks to pay somebody a lot of money, if you're right on the brink, it can do it. But you've got to be really convinced that these Broncos are just a player away.
What are your thoughts on Cooper Kupp? And I don't know if you guys talked about this on the your guys' Broncos show just recently, but
Hmm.
Cooper Kupp, they announced that he's going to be on the trade market. Is that a guy that you go after to get some depth at the receiver core for Bo Nix? Because again, we talked about the importance of what a franchise quarterback can mean to a team. If Bo Nix is in fact your franchise quarterback, a lot of that comes in line with getting him weapons. Would Cooper Kupp be a guy that
Hmm.
you personally would think could add to that?
I love Cooper Cup, and I used to hate
Former
him.
Big
So
Sky
again,
guy.
I'm a Montana fan. He went to Eastern Washington.
Yep.
He lit the Grizzlies up a couple times. Him and Vernon Adams out there.
Oh yeah.
Prior to Vernon going to Oregon,
Yeah.
Vernon's little sister wound up playing soccer at Colorado when I was covering, which is kind of fun. But
Oh,
yeah, I mean
nice.
that. Cooper Kupp has been an absolute monster for more than a decade now. I think he's 31,
I
32.
think
He's
so.
getting up
Which is
there.
crazy to think
Um,
about.
it
Well,
makes
because
you
I,
feel
I I
old.
was in Spokane when he was playing for Eastern Washington in
Yep.
Cheney, right down the road. So Marissa and I were covering Eastern
Hmm.
Washington when he was still playing there, which is wild to think about.
It really is wild to think about. I think it'd be awesome. There are questions about what exactly you want in a Sean Payton offense, especially because you can kind of see Bo through the Drew Brees lens and say, like, okay, because sometimes it's hard to say, what does Bo Nix need to succeed? Sometimes it's easier to go back and say, here's what a similar player needed to
Yeah.
succeed. How would you build an offense around a Drew Brees? And it just kind of takes the face off it a little bit. And in that case, you say you need like a dominant number one receiver who just wins one-on-ones underneath or even over the top occasionally. You need more guys who can kind of overload you underneath from the tight end spot, from running back spot. What you didn't see was a really dominant slot receiver. That just never was something that they invested in when it was Sean Payton and Drew Brees together in New Orleans. So you wonder if that's just because by chance that was not a guy who ever wound up on their roster, or is there something more to that, that isn't a position that you invest in? I think that with Cooper Cup being at the stage that he's in his career, if you could get him for 15 million bucks or less, I think that's an absolute steal. But it almost feels like you've got these bones there, like you've got the offensive line, you've got the quarterback. Now you figure out what weapons you want, and it's almost a blank slate there. So I would personally love it. I think that it'd be a great move. I also wouldn't be surprised if Sean Payton says, "Yeah, we're just not paying a slot receiver," and he does other stuff, obviously, maybe less so now at this point in his career than he did 5 years ago. But I wouldn't be surprised if Sean's particular. There are guys he really likes, there are guys he doesn't, and sometimes you are surprised by which ones are which. Um, I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, and look, the reality is the Broncos are in the conversation at this point after this year because, like you said, even some of the games they got blown out on or games that they lost, like, yeah,
Mhm.
some of them looked bad. Some of them looked very reasonable. Their game that they lost on a stupid kick to the Chiefs, I mean, was the biggest heartbreaker of the entire season. And a game that I truly, in my head, feel like the Broncos won, on my side of things. So it's like you have the pieces there. You have some pieces. You have a foundation. It's just about building on to that. So I'm I'm optimistic. And Lance
Mhm.
in the Toto chat said, 2 years. I think 2 years is realistic. Because the Broncos, here's the thing. The Broncos have shifted now after seeing what Bo Nix can do. They've shifted their mindset from we just need to figure out some sort of plan that works and then kind of like invest in that. Now they've figured out what works. They've figured out their guy. They've got Bo Nix. Now you can build around that. You can now build to win. You don't have to just build and you and I've talked about this on the show before. It felt like this year was a kind of figuring it out year. Like obviously we wanted them to go
Mhm.
win the Super Bowl and whatever. Like we had high hopes after we realized they could go to the playoffs. But realistically, we knew like this is still a building year. Anything beyond the playoffs is extra. Next year, the expectations go to like, how do we take a step beyond that? And then within 2 years,
Mhm.
I think it's realistic that the Broncos could be in the window of competing for a Super Bowl. Now, does that mean that they're going to be going up against the Chiefs, the Bills, like the Ravens, the Eagles, maybe? Like, a lot of things can change between now and then. But the Broncos are going to be in the conversation as we move forward. So that's the beauty of it right now. It's why we enjoyed this Broncos season immensely compared to the recent years that we've been experiencing Broncos football. We got to take our last break. I do, after the break, though, I want to talk a little bit more about your experience in New Orleans, talk a little about some of the interviews that you guys have gotten, some of the people you've talked to, and also talk about an article that I saw come out that had me shocked as we get ready for this Super Bowl. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right. Back here on the Denver Sports Podcast, we're wrapping things up. Final 15 minutes or so with our boy Henry Chisholm hanging out with us from New Orleans. I know you guys have been mingling, meeting, talking, getting to just, fill your cup out there with as many different sports media and players and personalities as you can. Who's the coolest person you've met so far, on or off air?
I mean, Chris Sims is always the coolest. And we've had him on a couple times, so it isn't like meeting him for the first time, but I mean, that's he's just a cool guy. He's a really cool guy. Um it's interesting. So the way the week works is you Monday, you have like the opening nights. They bring all the players out. You kind of get to bounce around, talk to whoever you need to talk to. We just had like a few questions. I'm not sure if we posted any of them yet, but just some questions that we wanted to ask a bunch of different people and see what the responses were. And we got some good ones. So we weren't like going out of our way to be like, okay, if we stand here for 15 minutes, we can get Hollywood Brown. It's like, yeah, we're happy with the practice squatters. As the week grows, there are more people who come along. So like I think today Bounty started. So
Mm,
Bounty, the paper towel company, whom we must all love, um, they'll bring in like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and like four other guys, put them in bounty jackets and say like go on like 15 different shows and talk for like 12 minutes about whatever, but then spend 3 minutes talking about how great Bounty is. And Old Spice will do the same thing, and so is all those, and it just builds throughout the week. So the first couple of days, it's like just curious who's out here. And so some media people, but for example, we're right next to the Pat McAfee show. He starts out here tomorrow. And I think on Friday he does his kind of like tour. And it's like, okay, let's see if we can get McAfee. Um, but just as the week grows, there's just more people who you turn around. Like yesterday, you turn around, it's like, oh, that's Matt Forte.
hmm.
Interesting. Hadn't thought about Matt Forte, awesome running back, but hadn't thought about for a while. But then as it goes along, like I remember last year in the middle of the show, one of the Chicago guys is like, "That's Joe Montana." It's like, yeah, it's Joe Montana walking right by. Or like it'll be like, "Oh, that's Donovan McNabb. I recognized him." So we're still in the early going, but by the end of the week, it'll be pretty crazy.
Yeah, hey man, that's fun. I saw you guys posted on X. What was it? Zach Stevens doing an interview with Cooper DeJean talking about Riley
Oh,
Moss. Like, you
yep,
guys are
we
making
got
the
him.
rounds. Like, it's a good
Sketch.
time, huh?
People really like Sketch, who
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't know much about him, the streamer, but yeah, everybody loves Sketch. And I was able to ask Sketch what his comparison to the Luka Doncic trade would be in the NFL. And you
hey
guys are gonna
yeah.
have to wait for tomorrow to hear what his answer was.
Yeah, that we'll be keeping our eye
Yeah.
on that as that goes on. I know well, and the funny thing too is that there's like non-football people out there that are like media members.
Hmm.
Like, I saw like our What Chaos guys are out there. They do our
Yep.
like national hockey podcast. I mean, so like it's just a who's who of media
Hmm.
as everything's
Tech
progressed.
Nine ran to Tech Nine.
You ran into Tech Nine. That's a
Big
blast down
Chiefs fan.
memory
It's one of
lane.
those where you're like, oh yeah, Tech Nine, yeah. But again, it's a lot of
Jeez.
stuff like that. They're like, there's I think his name is Jeremiah, but he's like the kid who interviews people. I don't even know who he does it for. But I told that like last night we were staying there, and I was like, oh, I just saw that kid, and it's like, oh, that's that kid from the internet. And I realized like that's the whole thing is. It's just random people from the internet who all get together for a week. You're like, ah, you're that guy from the internet.
I this is funny, and total side note for just a quick second. When I was at winter meetings in Dallas this year for all of our baseball fans, it was the same vibe. Obviously, again, different scale, but like I got up early in the morning. I go down to the hotel lobby. I'm getting coffee, and there's like Gabe Kapler sitting with with like
Hmm.
a couple famous broadcasters, Joe Davis and who else was it? Like the Dodgers manager, Dave Roberts. Like you're just sitting, and I'm just sitting having coffee, and it's like Dave Roberts, Gabe Kapler, Joe Davis.
Yep.
I think the Houston Astros manager was like, it was just, you're sitting there and you're like, this isn't like, if I was in a normal hotel, like in the middle of Montana, just visiting friends or something, and I just came downstairs and this group was sitting having coffee, I'd be losing my mind right now. But here it's just normal. Like this is just the way everything is. It's very unique.
Cam Newton will just have his set like somewhere. And
Big
like last year was pretty close to us. Or I know. I think it might have been Willie McGinnis. I think Willie McGinnis. He was right next to us last year. He has a podcast. And you're like, yeah, all week it's Willie McGinnis. But you go back and tell your 12-year-old self like you're just gonna be sitting next to Willie McGinnis all week. You're like, oh, that's crazy. That doesn't happen. But no, it's fun. I like Chad Ochocinco. He was out there yesterday. I think he was talking to Brandon Marshall, the receiver. Brandon Marshall was out there. So there's some of those guys who are here all week. But for the most part, as the week goes on, it's like, oh, there's Gronk. Or like, oh, there's The Rock. I know like last year, The Rock had to go to the bathroom. So he had like a security team not let anybody else into the bathroom. Everybody's like, what the hell? Why can't we go in there? Like, we gotta go. And The Rock comes out and they get away. It's like, yeah, I guess for The Rock, he gets that treatment.
yeah, he gets his own bathroom. What are we doing? He's not gonna use the porta potty.
Or like Lil Dicky. Ran into Lil Dicky last year and it's like, oh, what are you doing here, Lil Dicky?
It's the Super Bowl. Why not? I mean, you also have to remember there's just an absolutely obscene amount of money that goes into the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And that's how I'll segue into this, into everything else that we're talking about here, because the Super Bowl is just on another level, not only physically, but culturally, financially. I don't know if you saw this. There was an AP article that had me, just up in arms the other day when I saw it. The headline read like this, quote, "Winging it for the Super Bowl, broccoli might be a cheaper party snack this year." Did you see that? It was making its rounds on social media, and I had to bring that up because I'm like, that might be the most egregious thing I've ever seen put in a headline.
Also, it might be a cheaper snack. It absolutely is a cheaper snack because it's so much worse.
Like no one is getting broccoli for the freaking Super Bowl.
No, fry up some broccoli. No, it's just not what that day's about.
Like if you have like a vegetarian friend who can't eat like any of the other things that you have, first of all, like it's the Super Bowl. You just got to suck it up at that point. Sorry to all of our vegetarian, vegan listeners out there. Like you just have to understand that's what's going to happen.
It's the Super Bowl.
It's the Super Bowl. Like the farthest, if there's one veggie I will go on the Super Bowl, it's like carrots with some dressing, like next to like the chips. That's about the farthest I'll go on like the veggie side of things. Like, cause it's this, I'm not like trying to eat healthy on the Super, like it just, that doesn't make any sense to me. The money side of things is crazy though. I don't know if you had seen this, the financials. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to this kind of stuff. I like all of the financial side of the Super Bowl. On average, advertisers are shelling out $8 million per 30 seconds of a commercial. So if you want to do a minute ad for the Super Bowl, you're at about $16 million. That's also just absurd. And I know we look at that every year where you look at that and you're like, that can't be real. I do some sales stuff.
Well, you
for
remember
DNVR,
when it was like a million.
Or like even hundreds of thousands where you were like $500,000 for 30 seconds. Like that's my house. Now you're like $8 million for 30 seconds. Like, what are we talking about here? How much value can you really get from that?
Yeah, that's before you even consider the cost of making the ad. Because like all those ads, it's like, oh, also the ad is about Coach Prime and Nick Saban talking about whatever. So you got to pay these guys to be in the same spot. And you got to come up with like the script, and you got to get to pay everybody to shoot it and all that sort of stuff. I mean, if you're spending $8 million to put it on TV, you might as well spend another $8 million to make it good. You know, and start. You're going to use it for the next 6 months anyway. So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Did you notice when you put your thumb up that there was a little bubble that popped up with a thumb on your screen? Did you see that? Yeah, look at that.
Oh,
thumbs up.
Wow. We sure have the technology here at DNVR.
No, yeah, we do.
We don't have this one programmed yet.
There it is. Oh, no. We don't want any thumbs down, man. Come on. What are we doing here? Thumbs up for everyone. at home. Give us a thumbs up in the chat as well if you saw that, if you saw what we saw. I wanted to say, because people go real creative with the whole Super Bowl. Oh my God. Oh my God.
That's 2 thumbs up.
That's way too much, man. That's way too much.
That is.
Like, we got to end the show like that. Like, that's how you walk out on the show.
I'll be ready.
We'll be ready for that. If DNVR was going to make a Super Bowl commercial, because we're not in the game of like marketing, like we tend to appreciate, the fans and the conversations, word of mouth, like all of that kind of stuff. That's how we get our product out there to the world. But if DNVR was going to make a Super Bowl commercial, shell out $8 million for 30 seconds, I tried to like imagine how we would go about this. Would we try to go like all inspirational, and like some of RG's, like super cool vlog type, like inspirational, like this is DNVR and it like shows the bar? Or would it just be something super off the rails and wild? I'd have to think it would be something just absurd.
I've always thought like a This Is Sports Center type thing is absolutely the way to go. And so let's see. I think I would have been interning. It would have been, we signed a deal with Phil Lindsay, I think after his first big season as a Bronco. And as part of the deal, and I don't know all these details, but it's something like you get like 3 hours to shoot up to however many videos, and they can be, And so we were talking about what to do with them. And I was an intern at the time, so nobody really cared what I thought. But I thought like we do like a This Is Sports Center thing with Phil Lindsay around. We had the tiny little office at the time. It would have been incredible content. I can't remember what the idea was. I think one of them was like everybody just like puts on one of those fake afros because he had like the big hair at the time. It was before he cut it.
That
And
would be
I don't know
good.
what the joke was. I know, but something like that would be so good.
Why didn't we do that? I actually like that's
I
incredible.
don't know. I don't know. It would have been so good. And I know that there were conversations about like, well, what do you do with the commercial? Because at the time, I'm not sure if this is still our stance, but it's like we're digital, so we don't want to like ads on TV because we're against or like
Sure.
let's not make billboards. I remember that was a big one because we're digital, and I always thought like, well, we don't have that audience because like the random person driving a car isn't necessarily the person who's on it. Like let's look for a new audience and say like let's go to DMVR, but I don't think we've ever done billboards in any of the markets
No.
or TV ads. Someday.
It's yeah, maybe. But yeah, I just thought that I like that though. Those Sports Center ads were great.
Yeah.
Some of the Major League Baseball ones were definitely my favorite. This Is Sports Center type commercials. It was. I remember last year was the year of the crypto. This year, I guess they're saying there's going to be a bunch of AI commercials, which is, I don't know. I guess that's just the world we live in. Not my favorite thing.
It's
But
like made by Ugh.
yeah, I mean, I just better than the crypto commercials we were seeing last year. That was, Matt Damon would come out and be like, like this is like crypto.com, and then they just crashed and everyone went to jail, and that whole thing became history. But I'll ask you before we head off here. Do you have any crazy plans coming up the rest of this week? Anything big you guys are working on?
So the media party's tonight. So that's kind
As
of
long as you have
next.
pants.
I think that's the thing. I think we want to be. I think it starts at 7, and it's pretty close by. So I've got about 5 hours to get a bunch of writing done. See if we're trying to get more guests or videos or whatever over there, and then also buy pants. Um,
Important.
Tomorrow we have a couple good guests booked. I think Friday we might have a really good guest booked, but it's kind of still up in the air. Um, but yeah, I think we might be free at night moving forward,
That's
as
dangerous.
far as I know. So
That's dangerous.
it's seriously is here. But no, I think we kind of got into a groove. We get some good guests. They should keep building. I think maybe a current Bronco or two will be in town. We're hoping. Um, but yeah, should be a good week.
I'm loving it. You guys are crushing it out there, having tons of fun. Be sure if you're not, I'm sure you already are, but be sure if you have not already, follow DNVR Broncos on all of your socials. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube to DNVR Sports. As always, we appreciate everything you guys do at home. The fans, shout out to Riley for pushing the buttons, keeping us all tech savvy here. Hank, you got to send us off on this show with some fireworks. I don't know what you did last time, but send us away. That's it. Peace out, guys.
We all silly like the mayor.